Hi there, and welcome to AP Government. Today we're going to be talking about American elections. And I want to walk you through this little slide presentation here to give you an idea of why they're important, what they do, and how the whole system works. Now, this is an election is part of what we call linkage institutions here in the United States. And if you're from my class, you're familiar with this diagram here. We've talked about the policymaking cycle all year. It starts with the people over here, goes through the linkage institutions, which is what we're talking about in this segment. Those link the people with government, moves things onto the policy agenda so that those people who make decisions and make policy can talk about them. Then it becomes policy, and that policy will then affect the people, which might start the whole cycle going again. But this is what we're talking about here in this unit is linkage institutions, and elections are one of them, okay? So what do we need to know? Well, let's start off with the basics. Elections are very important. Voting is patriotic. We're told this our whole lives. It's our civic duty in order to go out and vote. And it's very true. First of all, because they're a direct link between the people and the government. This is a way where we as Americans have the ability to tell our policymakers whether we like what they're doing or not. We also get to tell them what policies we support and what policies we don't support. And that's really, really powerful. They also provide legitimacy to elected officials. Those people who are in office, we know, have their jobs because they got them legitimately through a process that's generally accepted by all of us. And even when we don't get someone in office who we really like, we all accept the fact that they got there the right way. And then, of course, elections form the basis of any democratic system. Now, just because you have elections doesn't mean you have a democracy. Saddam Hussein, Joseph Stalin, they were all very famous for having elections and for having extremely high approval rates in those elections. But you got to understand that polling places there were staffed with people with very large guns. And so if you didn't vote for Saddam Hussein, you had some real issues on your hands. So he tended to get pretty close to 100% of the vote most of the time. I wouldn't call that democratic. They are an election. But here in the United States, a lot of the concern in the last 20, 25 years has been with getting out the vote of the young people. Because historically, young people don't vote very much. And so we've had campaigns like Rock the Vote, there was Vote or Die. Nothing really seems to work, though, regardless of how much MTV or anyone else pushes these movements. They don't seem to really move the dial too much on who actually shows up to vote. So do they make a difference? Simple answer is yes. Elections absolutely, positively make a difference, all right? You may believe it, you may not believe it. You're going to talk to people who throughout your life will say that elections make no difference whatsoever, but they absolutely do. It's the basis of the entire system that we have. Now, this is a link which I usually make in my classroom here. I'm not able to make it on this video here, but sort of tongue-in-cheek here. We take a look at how things might have turned out differently if the 2000 election had gone differently. And I have a link here to a video clip. I'll put that link down in the description below so that if you're interested, you can take a look. It's humorous, it's funny, and I think you'll like it. So take a moment and take a look at that. All right. This was a scene from a 2006 appearance by Al Gore on Saturday Night Live, and it's kind of funny to be able to laugh at politics sometimes. All right, so when we're talking about elections, let's go back and look at the year 2000. And 2000 is an election that political scientists have talked about ever since, because we have situations like this. Here's this guy who's staring through this magnifying glass at a piece of paper. And for those of you who have no idea, this was a common sight in the weeks after the polls closed in the year 2000. But the question is, what's he doing? What are people looking for? How did it relate to an American election? Why am I showing you this picture? And why am I talking about something that happened, almost 15 years ago? Well, hey, it's a good thing you asked, because I'm here to explain that to you. Okay, but first, let's get a little bit of background just about elections in general. All right. Here in America, we have three types of elections. Type number one are primaries. Now, in a primary, people from the same party will compete with one another to get their party's nomination. And then that will, the winners of those parties, I mean, and we're really talking Democrats and Republicans here. There are going to be primaries from other parties, but they're not going to win the presidency. So Democrats and Republicans, right? So they select the party nominees through the primary system. Then you go into the general election. And in the general election, you get to select the office holders, where you have your Democrat running against your Republican to find out who's actually going to become president of the United States. In some areas of the United States, there are also what we call policy elections. Now, these are very big out west, and they have lots of implications. One of these is the referendum. And in a referendum system, some bills which are passed by state legislatures have to be approved by the people. And so they're put on a ballot. And so next to the names of all the candidates that you might have, there will be referendums of, would you like to spend this many millions of dollars for this project? Vote yes or no. And so you get pretty long ballots out there. And then we have the initiative petition, which is really completely different. Here, ordinary Americans create and write laws, get enough signatures through the petition process to get those laws put on the ballot, and the voters vote on them, so that you can have laws made without the legislature or the governor ever being a part of the system. Now, again, this is only limited to some states, and they tend to be the more progressive states, and they tend to be mostly in the West. So if you live on the East Coast, you're not going to maybe see a lot of initiative petitions and stuff like that. But very famous example here. Here's a guy holding up his state of California medical marijuana identification card. He's been legally buying drugs since 1996. And, I've been using this picture for a few years now. What I love about it is, look at this picture. Here's his picture on his marijuana identification card. He is like the happiest guy on earth that he got this. And I think that's pretty funny that he smiles that big in that card. Now that's what we call direct democracy. Okay. And typically we talk about an indirect democracy where we select leaders to make decisions. This is direct democracy. People make laws, and that's something entirely different. All right, there are some guidelines for elections set out by the Constitution and other areas. Constitution sets terms for different elected officials. In the House of Representatives, they're elected every 2 years. Senators are elected every 6 years. The president is elected every 4 years. And through a very, very complicated and not really much used outside the United States system, the Electoral College is used to select the president. We will get to the Electoral College in another video because it can be a little confusing, and it can be very simple, and it just depends on how you look at it. Congress sets the dates of national elections. They always set them for the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Now, it seems a little convoluted. Like, why would you make it that confusing? Why not just the first Tuesday in November? Well, if Tuesday fell on November 1st, people might have a harder time remembering that it's going to happen. And so they set this up. Beyond that, states take care of most everything else. And that's kind of how the system is set up. It didn't work so well for some people during the Jim Crow era, but when they're writing the Constitution, that's what they came up with. Just to give you a little more information on different types of primaries, there are primaries that occur in most states. These are where candidates from the same party compete for the nomination, and you generally see three types. In some states, they have closed primaries, and with 50 states and then the territories and everything else, we have to oversimplify this a little bit. Okay, in a closed primary system, you have to register with the party in order to vote. In an open primary system, anyone can vote in any primary. And then you have some blanket systems where everyone votes. Caucuses are more of a debate society. Only a couple of places do them, most importantly, Iowa. And then finally, there's the general election, where parties run against one another for office.